Hey guys, what's going on? I got 3 uppers and 3 downers for you here today, but let's start off on a positive note. Joy in the Morning by Betty Smith. I've mentioned that I like Betty Smith before, not that she's written that many books, and I could have just as easily recommended A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, but I thought this was a lesser known book. Betty Smith is essentially the main character, your first person narrator, just like in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. And it is the same character because this character is Betty Smith. From what I've read, both books closely mirror her life. In this one, she's older. Her and her new husband Carl are moving to a new town where he's going to university to become a lawyer. So of course they struggle with the challenge of living with each other for the first time in a new town. Money's tight, their parents don't really like each other. And this is an upper, but of course all books have to have conflict. It's just that in this book, the conflicts are manageable. It's scary at times, but they're manageable, and the best part is they're all resolved. And personally it speaks to me because I'm newly married, I'm looking to start a family, which is kind of where she is in this book with her husband Carl. And she's a little apprehensive about it, but she's optimistic and she knows she wants to do it and she's more or less excited for it. Whereas a lot of the advice I get is, you'll never go on vacation again and your relationship will never be the same, and you know how risky childbirth is, and have you heard about this rare childhood disease, and you know what the cost of diapers is, and you know how much it costs to feed a child, and you know how much hospital bills are? It all becomes a little overwhelming. So it's nice to read something where it's calm and level-headed, and they just didn't think about it as much back then. And it all comes together in a beautiful happy ending, a nice little bow. But we don't live in that fantasy realm. We got to go down into the emotional trenches with Never Let Me Go by Ishiguro. This one also has a first-person young female main character. She's in boarding school along with all the typical characters, the false friends, the bullies, the love interests, the hunky guy on the football field. But she can tell that something's not quite right. And us as the reader can also definitely tell that something's not quite right. And then when it hits you, it really smacks you in the face. It's heartbreaking really, especially when you see where the title comes from. I can't say too much more without spoilers, but it's a great read. Ishiguro is a super smooth writer. He makes you question the limits of your compassion, or rather, how you kind of need to limit your compassion, which can be a hard thing to do, especially given this main character who he makes you feel for in such a deep way. It had an effect on me. And I hear the movie was trash, so don't bother with that one. Alright, let's go back up here with The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I read this when I was working at the library. It had just come out and everyone and their mother was reading this book. I was trying to normalize my reading habits, so I figured why not? And I'm glad I did. It's a beautiful story. It follows a main character who's unsure if they made the right decisions in life, kind of questioning, what could I have been? What could have happened if I did X, Y, or Z? Very similar to Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is an incredible movie, by the way. The main character slips into this metaphysical midnight library where she gets to peer into different lifespans she may have had. And some of them seem better, some of them seem worse, but at the end of the day, the book ensures you are exactly where you need to be. Do not worry about what could have been, do not worry about what ifs. Just worry about where you are, which I know is not an easy feat, but this book helped me do that, which is why it's on the list. I'm sure everyone has checked it out already here on BookTube, but if you haven't, then you should. And this book's got a lot of chess metaphors, which I like. Okay, way down here with Franz Kafka, The Trial. I don't know why I read this book, to be honest with you. And I would recommend every book here that you should read, even if it makes you a little sad. But not this one. It's about a young guy who's approached by these unspecified agents, accusing him of committing an unspecified crime, and asking him to appear in court. And as the story goes on, things get more vague, more absurd, more abstract, and it just spirals into this bureaucratic dystopian nightmare. And I'm sure people have written dissertations about the unease that reading Kafka gives you. I can't really synthesize it, but it's there, and it's rough. And if I had to take a stab at it, I'd say that it's too real. Like, I kept reading this saying it's too real, which is crazy because it's an absurdist book. But just the way nothing made sense, and everything kind of aggravated you, it was too real. Because life's not rational, life doesn't make sense, but generally that's why we read books, because things make sense in books. There's problems with easy answers. Things happen for a reason. Bad things happen to bad people. The good guys win in the end. But with Kafka, nothing makes sense. It's more or less random happenings, and of course it's Kafka, so it's going to be Kafka-esque, and it just goes down, and down, and down, and down. And to top it all off, this is an unfinished work, so it's not even satisfying at the end. Not that it was satisfying at any point. So this one is definitely not a recommendation, it's a warning. Don't read this book. You're welcome. If you've watched my other videos, you probably guessed that this one was on the list, A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman. It's about the cranky old guy in your neighborhood who never waves at you and always has a grimace and yells at cars that are going too fast. And it's Fredrik Backman, so it always feels very genuine to me. He's got an insight into humanity that always clicks with me. Anxious People is also a good one, and that has more of a broader scope where it would appeal to more people, I think, but A Man Called Ove appealed more specifically to me. And if you've watched my other videos, you know it is in a special group all on its own of books that made me cry. Because the main character is very much like me in the way that he handles stress and the way that he handles the irrationality of the world. And it's not that Backman offered me an answer to that, but it's just that he reached so deep and so precisely into me. And he said, hey man, I know. I know. Because that's all you can do. There's no answers to these deep problems, but you can just reach out and say, I understand. I get it, man. And that's enough. And it's certainly enough to offer it a spot in this video here. This last downer I don't actually own because it is so insanely popular I have never seen it in a used bookstore. It's a hard science fiction first contact story, so not a book that most would describe as devastating. But it was for me because of the main character, Siri, who had seizures as a kid and had to have some kind of semi-lobotomy kind of thing and replaced half of their brain with a machine, I believe. And this offered a lot of challenges for him socially. But it allowed him a spot on the crew to investigate the alien craft because he became a synthesizer, which is some super specialized pattern recognizer, which is where the psychological aspect and the philosophical aspect kind of kicked in, and I really latched onto. There's a second narrative strewn throughout the story about Siri and his past relationship that really hit home to me. They have arguments that essentially boil down to her calling him a rational bastard, and him not necessarily denying it, because he is. He's a battle computer, and when he finds himself in stressful situations, he tactfully and rationally finds the answer to it. And a lot of times, that answer is completely devoid of emotion and compassion. And from an evolutionary standpoint, isn't that the best option? Which is what brings me to the devastating part of this book, is that it makes you question if those aspects are necessary, and if we've hindered ourselves as a race because of our obsession with them. Of course, it's closely linked to our humanity, though, so no one's going to argue that we should discard them. But from a strategical perspective, maybe we should. Which is a thought that's been bouncing around in my head ever since I read that book. It sticks with you. And if I had to recommend any of these books above the others, it would definitely be Blindsight by Peter Watts. But we're not going to end on that downer. I got a bonus book for you here. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I've talked about it before. It's about a young boy who goes out into the world on a quest, opens himself up to everything that the world has to offer. I'm not going to do it justice, so just go read it. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye-bye.